Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the GamerNerdz Now Loading podcast. I'm Voyce. I have my colleague Dinx with me. We're going to do something a little different today. We're going to be talking to the CEO of Gamer Institute, Daniel Grzelak, the group that initiated the Torch for Gaming initiative. So what it is an online petition to have esports become part of the Olympics. A pretty ambitious and revolutionary idea, and since its inception now has over 9,000 signatures and 132 countries on board. We also have Geneviève, aka LivinPink, who's well known for her StarCraft II streams, and she's also well known in MLG. So let's get this whole thing started. My first question is for you, Dan. What sparked the idea for you to want to have esports become part of the Olympics?
Sure. So I guess everyone's had a go at some of the Olympic sports. I mean, we're all guilty of it. You watch equestrian or synchronized swimming and, you mumble to yourself or to your friends occasionally, look, why is that in there? And I don't think that's necessarily a fair thing to do, but we all do it. And so while the Olympics were on, or just before the Olympics were on, we did the same thing. And we realized that, I guess, gaming should be in the Olympics. The other part of it is, at Gamer Institute, we deal with professional gamers all the time, and what we see is they're not necessarily given the respect that they deserve as professionals. So we brought those two ideas together and decided to put the petition online and start getting signatures.
One of the things you mentioned on the website is that it says esports at the Olympics, tougher than ice dancing, faster than synchronized swimming, more relevant than curling. Now, those are pretty bold statements. Do you stand behind it?
Look, mostly those are just a bit of fun.
Yeah.
But it does get people thinking, what are the differences between the sports in the Olympics and esports? How are they similar as well?
Yeah.
Because certainly, one of the first things that people say is, look, it's not a physical activity, so it can't be in the Olympics. But the reality is that it does have, physical elements. It is becoming really popular and those sorts of things. So those are the kinds of, thoughts that those statements are meant to entice.
My next question, I guess, at this point is open to everyone. Actually, Geneviève, we'll start with you on this one. So as Dan said, in the gaming industry, pro gamers are not taking that seriously. Do you stand by that? Do you think that other people don't necessarily take pro gamers seriously? Are we only taken seriously in the gaming industry, or is it moving into the mainstream?
I think, of course, people in the gaming industry know that gaming and esports are pretty important and upcoming, but outside of it, I think the response is mixed. Sponsors are starting to notice it, obviously, because I've seen many big company names come up into esports, like LG sponsoring a Korean team, StarCraft, I think. I hope I'm not mistaken. And like Monster and Red Bull, that's very serious sponsors, and they're putting a lot of money into it. So I think they're seeing it as important and good for the younger community. But like adults actually don't know this exists. A lot of people never even heard of gaming being competitive and make a professional living out of it. So I think there's still a lot of work to do because so many people aren't just aware of it existing. Even gamers don't know about esports.
It's slowly moving up, but I think it's also very niche knowledge and not everyone's well aware of it. Actually, we initially were supposed to have Pierre from Montreal, who runs MTLSF, which is Montreal's fighting gaming community, on the call, but he couldn't make it. But actually wanted to ask him a question about the fighting scene. So I guess Dinx is very well versed in the fighting scene. So I guess we'll shoot this one your way, Dinx. My question is, right now in the fighting game arena, EVO, so you have a lot of fighting tournaments that are kind of roads and preliminaries to EVO. Now with the Olympics, if esports become parts of the Olympics and now suddenly you have the fighting gaming community as part of the Olympics, will EVO suddenly become a road to the Olympics? Well, how do you see everything all blending together?
I think it's a very long time before something like EVO or SummerSlam or any one of these major tournaments that take place in North America, for example, where you have international players. If anything, you'll still have those taking place every year, following the regular schedule, and obviously how players place at those type of events. And if it does come to the point where they are involved in Olympic Games, then yeah, you could look at, that's how you qualify, which pool you enter and everything. Those are definitely not going to go anywhere because the community is so focused around that. There's such a strong support. The Olympics are every 4 years. And these tournaments, there's one every month, and you have EVO every July. So that's definitely not going to go anywhere. But I think the placement the players have there and how they actually compete and how they actually qualify and all that, that'll come into play if, for example, fighting games, which obviously I would think is a major component of the esports community, actually becomes a member of the Olympic Games.
Dan, my question for you right now is about the petition itself. Yesterday I checked it and there's 8,800 signatures, and today is about 9,000 and more. So it is getting its word out there more and more, and people are definitely, backing it up. And there's 132 countries that are, again, backing this up. What is the minimum requirement that you need to achieve for you to say, okay, you know what, I have all the ammunition I need to go forward, and now I'm going to go take this petition and do something with it? How many countries do you want to have involved? How many signatures do you need? And once you've done that, what's your next step?
Okay, so the first thing is that officially there's no set number that's required to petition the Olympic Committee, as far as I know. But our goal is to reach 100,000.
Okay.
So one of the things that's required to make, esports a legitimate Olympic sport is to have a certain number of people participating in the sport. And I guess one of the things that a petition does is give an indication of those numbers. So we'd like to reach maybe 100,000 people having signed the petition. And once we do that, we'd like to petition the Olympic Committee directly. Now, the interesting thing is we probably wouldn't do that ourselves.
Yeah.
What we'd like to do is see a peak body set up for the esports scene, with all of the major players represented, from the fighting scene, from the strategy gaming scene, from the tournament organizers, etc., and then pass those signatures on to them so that they can petition the Olympic Committee. It's no use, I guess, for us as a single company or a single organization going forward with this by ourselves. We need the support of the entire community to be able to do something like this.
One day I'm cruising the web for all things gaming, and then I see Torch for Gaming on all the major gaming sites. How did that happen? How did you go from launching a website with an idea to have it being broadcast everywhere?
Oh, look, it's just a matter of doing the hard yards, contacting media, contacting people who are names in the esports industry and telling them about it. And, doing the interviews, doing the podcast like I'm doing now, and just getting the word out there. Once you get a certain number of people talking about it, then the word spreads. If you're doing something useful to people, then people talk about it, and then it kind of takes on a life of its own, which it has done now. So I guess the signatures that you've seen overnight have actually come from mainly Russia and China.
Okay.
Because unbeknownst to me, overnight or a couple of days ago, some of the big Chinese gaming sites have hosted content about Torch for Gaming, and it's really taken off. And that's something that we want to see. We want to see the community getting behind it and spreading the word.
Okay.
Daniel, I want to ask you something. This is Dinx from the GamerNerdz. So right now, the Olympic Games are about the international community coming together to compete in sport. There's obviously a lot of countries that are represented. In the fighting game community in particular, you have the United States, you have Japan, and you have Korea, really, which brings the strongest representation. So would you want this to be just the best players from every country, or would every country have to be represented for it to be a legitimate offering? Because I think for the Olympic sports you see in the summer, not every country competes in every sport, but there still has to be a set number, or at least a minimum number of entrants. So would that be a limiting factor for Torch for Gaming, where you have, let's say between only a handful of countries that can legitimately compete in the sport, or would you just want only those countries represented because they have the best talent?
So look, I think everyone to the degree possible should be represented. That's one of the ideals of the Olympic Games, is that everyone can participate and everyone can be represented. But if you look at other sports, for example, basketball, it's the USA, maybe Spain, and then everyone else. There's always, I guess, a group of countries or a group of athletes who dominate. And so I expect the very same thing will happen in gaming. There'll be a few top countries, maybe the USA and Japan and Korea, like you mentioned, and then there'll be others. We need to set the qualifying bar, I guess, low enough that everyone who wants to be included can be included, and it makes it a legitimate competition, but not not low enough that it becomes crazy and that people who can't really compete are competing.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
when it comes to the Olympics generally, I mean, most of the sports that exist till this date have been in existence for a long time, and they haven't really varied ever since they have been in existence. But gaming is very dynamic. One second you have Black Ops, now you have Black Ops 2 coming out. You have Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Now you have Tekken Tag Tournament 2 coming out. How would we know which games will be included as an Olympic event? Because there will be a lot of games coming out between that 4-year span. So will it be like the way it is with all these tournaments where some people are pros at Tekken Tag or at Tekken, some people are pros Street Fighter Cross Tekken, or will it be people necessarily have to be pros at certain genres because you can't necessarily predict what games will be out by the time the Olympics quote unquote for esports comes out?
So I'll jump in there if I can. So one of the interesting things about games and the gaming industry that's happening right now is you're seeing esports being used to extend the longevity of games.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at things like Counter-Strike. Esports has allowed Counter-Strike to exist for over a decade. You look at things like the StarCraft series, for example, StarCraft, the original Brood War, and now StarCraft II. Esports has actually allowed that game to continue. Typically what you see in the life cycle of games is, there's 3 or 4 months where the game's played intensely, and then there's a slow drop-off towards, the game dying off. But when you have a competitive scene around the game tends to stay alive. So I guess what I'm predicting will happen is that games will stay alive longer and longer. And they'll change a little bit over time, there'll be updates and that kind of thing. But we need some kind of stability. You can't have different games being introduced in different Olympic Games, because then also for the audience watching these things, they won't be able to understand it. And initially, that's going to be one of the barriers anyway. The mainstream is not going to be able to understand gaming. And we need ways of, bringing it to the mainstream audience so that, they know what's going on.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I just want to add to that point that Daniel pointed out. So, like, in the fighting game community, I mean, people still play Street Fighter II, competitively. This year is Street Fighter's, 25th anniversary, so that game's been along for a very long time. People still play Street Fighter 3 Third Strike competitively. Street Fighter 4 is going to be around for a long time, so I don't think it'll be an issue with, all these new games coming in. Sure, certain games will have, more of a population behind them, but there's certain titles that you can consider timeless even.
Yeah.
And you have the community, and people will always be ready to play those competitively. So it's still why you see Counter-Strike. It's still why you see Street Fighter II. I'm sure it's still why you'll see, the original StarCraft and all the subsequent revisions.
Jen, what's your opinion on this?
I think it might be actually hard to pick which game, because for the RTS scene, I guess StarCraft is pretty obviously the choice that people would go for. But for the MOBA scene, we have League versus Dota 2 right now. So which one do you pick? Do you pick both? Why would you pick 2 MOBAs? If you're picking, I don't know, if you're picking StarCraft and you're picking League and Dota 2, then why not get, at this point, Age of Empires? I don't know. There's just so many games. I mean, Age of Empires didn't really make a lot of sense to put into the Olympic Games. But I just mean, there's just so many choices. I don't know how people would pick. And also, just on my first answer, I said something that wasn't right. LG sponsored IM, so people who were ready to hate on me, stop. I just fixed it. I'm sorry.
They already left the comments, so it's too late. You guys have answered the questions about the games, but in the Olympic, will it revolve around the particular game, or will gamers suddenly have to become pros at a genre? So someone who's a pro at Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, will he now have to become proficient at Street Fighter Cross Tekken because he's going to fall into that category of fighting games, or will he just stay niche to that one game he's pro at?
Well, I mean, in the current Summer Olympics, I mean, you have for example, in weightlifting, the different weight classes, there's different types of athletic events. So you have the 100, the 200, the 400. There's a bunch of variations. I'd hope that you'd have genres, the fighting genre, maybe different titles. I mean, there's so many different possibilities they could think of or introduce. But right now, the Olympic, it does define between weight class, between length of the race, between the type of people racing and entering. So I wouldn't be surprised if the esports Olympic Games would do something similar, where they have delineation or definition of who can play, who can't play.
I think, sorry to jump in, I think to a certain extent, some of these answers we just don't know yet. We'll have to wait and see how the scene evolves and how things take shape. So we can't necessarily answer those questions, some of those questions right now.
I just want to get an understanding, because it's a really ambitious, idea, and I really want to see it happen. But you have to be proud of yourself. I mean, you're a pioneer for a movement. Okay, so here's another question. I know it's very far off from this, but the hosting of the esports Olympics, you guys predict it to be kind of like the way it is right now, where different countries participate every 4 years and they have to host it in their own regions, or one central place that is the central pivotal point for esports Olympics?
I would say it would have to be part of the Olympics as it is now, just because I don't see the Olympic movement changing that much. And I think it fits well. Everyone is already traveling for different events, the MLGs, the various events that are going on. So I think it wouldn't change at all.
Okay. Anyone else?
I mean, yeah, I have to agree with Daniel. Like, it's the Olympic Games, unless it's an offshoot like the Paralympic Games. And yeah, the image of pro gamers and gamers in general is that we're nerds, we're dorks, we're out of shapes. But I don't think that's legitimate in any way. And to make it an actual event, part of something as big as the Olympics, it should absolutely be in the same venue, hosted by the same host country, and the people who participate in the esports, I mean, they shouldn't be treated any differently.
I've asked all the questions I wanted to ask Dinx. Are there any things you in particular want to ask Dan who's on the line?
Yeah, so Dan and LivinPink, so you guys, you participate or you follow esports. So I guess it kind of goes to a question that Steve asked, Voyce asked originally, sorry. It's the image that people have of gaming. Like Jen had mentioned that people don't think, or don't even look at video games as a competitive sport, and they picture us all as middle-aged teenagers and young adults are staying in our parents' basements. We're out of shape. We have no job. All we do is play video games till we fall asleep, and we're filthy and all that. You think it's an image problem? Like, getting gaming to the Olympics is a huge undertaking, and obviously we commend you on your effort and all. But what do you think you have to do about the image that gaming has associated with it? Like, what does the gaming community need to do to change it and to clean its image up before something like the Olympics is even considering adding esports to its repertoire of events?
Hello?
So,
Anybody?
I'll jump in as well. I think one of the interesting things about this is, and I'll answer your question in a second, but one of the interesting things is that if you look back at something like DMX, back in the 1990s, it's only the kids that were participating in DMX that thought it was cool, and everyone else looking from the outside thought it was, just children, mucking around in the dirt with their bikes. And eventually, it took a few people close to the scene to, create something like the X Games, and then it took, a bunch more people to bring it to the Olympic Games. But eventually it happened. And I think the same thing, I guess, needs to happen with esports is we as a community need to start making those progressions. And we definitely are, with things like the MLG creating a deal with CBS to have esports broadcast on mainstream television. That's something that we need to do. Now, to get back to your question, there's certainly an image problem that esports has, just like I think BMX had that kind of image problem. And to a certain extent, that's an educational process. Once esports gets into the mainstream media, once people start watching it, once kids start growing up with this thing and seeing it as a legitimate thing to do with their life, then things will change. So we kind of need a societal shift. It's not just a matter of doing X, Y, or Z to shift that perception, but it's a matter of time and letting it evolve.
Exactly.
So LivinPink, same question for you. Like, the PC gaming community, like World of Warcraft players, they're portrayed in media as, and it's no insult to the real World of Warcraft players or, Dota 2 players or StarCraft players, but basically it's like fat slobs, sitting on their home PC and stuff. So you think the PC gaming community has a large image problem as well?
I think there is a general misconception about it, but I don't think it's, like, if you actually try to look at what esports is and look at the footage or at an MLG, you soon realize that esports is really treated seriously, and that the gamers are actually, they have a rigorous training schedule, much like an athlete, like especially in Korea. I mean, they have a team, they have sponsors, they have a planned training schedule. They go to they're forced to go to the gym, like some teams are. They have like nutritionists and all that stuff. So it's actually very serious. And gamers aren't just like gaming 100% of the time. I mean, there's coaches. It's a lot like sports, to be honest, but there's just so much stuff that needs to improve, I think, for it to be in the Olympics. Like, it's probably going to take many, many years because it needs to be more popular and more stable, and people have to figure out a way to make it more accessible because a lot of people, if they watch, let's say, StarCraft, they just won't understand what the hell is going on. And the level of commentary is very high, so for a newbie, it's really, really hard to get into and understand what's going on, I think.
I think, with just the online gaming, playing on Xbox Live or playing on, PlayStation 3 online or whatever services, I mean, people are already playing competitive gaming against each other. So, I mean, if we're already doing this, esports shouldn't be that huge of a leap. And I think just with the right amount of broadcasting and more visibility, and like we saw at E3 that esports is going to be broadcast on Xbox Live, if I'm not mistaken. So I think esports moving to the Olympics, not necessarily that far away, and I think gamers that are just casual gamers have a lot of tools at their disposal to make that leap.
I know that I agree with you about that. I know that it's accessible for gamers, but I wanted to mean like as a crowd or as a community who is actually supporting the Olympics. It's like a little bit far-fetched, I feel like right now. You have to like find a way to include the non-gaming people to watch it. Like some people who watch football, they don't play football, and for some reason they watch it. I feel like those people should be able to watch StarCraft as well and enjoy it like they do, even if they don't play StarCraft or any other game.
So Jen makes a really good point. So, I mean, people have to want to watch it. So obviously, if it's the same community that's only watching, this type of sport on the Olympics, then it really hasn't grown anywhere. There are certain Summer Olympic sports that are added, every Olympics, and they're tested out to see the reaction and the support it gets from the audience. And to further that, I mean, think about it. If the gamers, or in this case, the Olympic athletes, were participating in esports, I mean, you have to get support from your country as well. So if the image is that esport people are just, lazy kids playing in their parents' basement and they're not treated like legitimate athletes, then you're not going to have the sponsorship, that type of sponsorship from the country because they don't believe in it. So there is definitely a lot of an image issue that needs to be fixed, or at least cleaned up, because I can't imagine the esports athletes paying their own way, for example, to the Olympic Games, whereas everyone else is, handled by the country, or you have a huge budget dedicated to Olympic training, and if esports is not considered a real sport, then that's, that whole message is lost because the country's not supporting them, then neither will the audience or the crowd that's watching the Olympics.
Nelson, I personally think that gaming right now is becoming more and more mainstream, and more people are playing games, more people are accepting it, especially, because of, mobile gaming. We're not even going to get into that right now, but it's becoming more and more accessible, and there's a lot of sponsors, a lot of private companies that will want to sponsor gaming because they know gaming is the quote-unquote cool thing to do now, so they will sponsor it. So when it comes to funding, I really doubt there will be lack of funds.
Go ahead. But you don't see, corporate sponsorship at the Olympics. It's not about that. In the fighting game community, yes, you have big companies like Mad Catz, like Namco, like Capcom, obviously supporting the community. You don't have that sponsorship at the Olympic Games because it's not about the money. It's about the competition in sport. It's about reaching the best you can be to, outdo your competition. So I'll be very, very surprised if we ever see Mad Catz sending people on behalf of the United States to the Olympics, like that. I think that is even farther off than esports at the Olympic Games.
So I actually think that everyone is right. And the reason I think that is, if you look at esports on a time continuum and you put South Korea at the very right edge, and then you put the US and then the Scandinavian countries and maybe Germany somewhere in the middle, and then you put places like Australia on the left, you kind of see where the progression is happening. You see in Korea that the mainstream is watching. The mainstream is understanding that these guys are not fat slobs. These guys are actually, training, and, they have the coaches and the nutritionists, etc. And then in the US, it's kind of an in-between where some people see it, but mainly the general public doesn't. But you can see that it's heading towards that, right? You know, it's heading towards the guys who are playing esports being superstars, etc., and being recognized. And you see some of the major sponsors coming in, but not all of them. Like if you go to some of the more traditional companies now and ask them for sponsorship in the US, they'll laugh at you. But you can see some of the cooler and hipper companies, you know, bringing their money into these esports. And then on the very left, if you look at somewhere like Australia, only the very small companies are being involved in esports. And it's got a very small community. People are trying, but, you know, they can't make it in Australia. They have to move to Korea or move to the US. But you can see, but the thing is, you can see all of these phases in the evolution throughout the world now. You've just got to go to different places to see them.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of bringing everyone in line to that same level of where Korea is at.
And we can take this conversation and keep talking forever, but we have to cut the line at some point, and I have to cut it here.
Wait, hold on. I have one last question.
All right, go ahead.
Don't come in with. So Daniel, you know, obviously you've made some great strides in this movement, and you've created a lot of buzz. I actually heard about this during the Olympic Games on the gaming forums. I was very impressed from what you've done so far. In your view, because you are, you know, you're heading towards for gaming, you're heading the Gamer Institute. What is some sort of timeline? Are we going to see, you know, esports in our lifetimes? Is it a long way? Is it the next? I mean, okay, obviously it will be the next Olympics, but what is your what is the timeline that you are okay with, and you will know that, you know, I have set the pace and I have set laid down the stones for this to actually appear in the Olympics and be recognized as a legitimate Olympic sport?
Look, I'd like to see it in 2020, maybe 2024. But like a lot of things still need to happen in the gaming industry. You know, we need to have a peak body, a governing body that, you know, sorts all this kind of stuff out, because the Olympic Games won't even accept a sport unless it has a governing body. But look, 2020 seems like a reasonable target because the upswell and the growth of esports is actually happening right now, and it's happening really fast. So yeah, I guess 2020, 24.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. It's very short. Do you think esports could actually get into the Olympics before, let's say, something like chess? I personally doubt it, because chess is kind of more accepted already.
The difference, I guess, there is a difference between chess and esports. You actually do need some physical interaction with the sport in esports. So you need things like fast twitch reflexes, you need great manual dexterity, etc. The difference with chess, for example, is that it doesn't require any of that. You don't need any physical interaction with the game. It's just a matter of deciding where pieces move and then having those pieces move. So I think that's the difference.
Dan, I really appreciate you taking this call with us and sitting down with us, and, you know, to just get more understanding of your initiative. I really think it's a great initiative, and I want to see Gamer Institute, and I want to see your name, you know, paved into the memories and into the halls of the future Olympic sports. So listen, thank you on behalf of all gamers for, you know, initiating it, and we hope to see this happen in the near future.
Thank you very much, and I hope everyone gets behind and supports it.
Yep, everyone go out and, you know, and sign. We'll include the link in the description of this video. So Dan, where can we find you on Twitter?
Twitter/Gamer Institute or Twitter/GIDAGRZ, the Grizz. And yeah, and visit the website and check it out.
Perfect. And Jen, where can we find you?
You can find me at LivinPink SC2, LivinPink SC2.
Thank you. Well, you know where to find us at the GamerNerdz. Thanks for tuning into this podcast. I guess we'll see you next time on the GamerNerdz Now Loading Podcast.